Hello, welcome everybody. My name is Krista Sukup. I'm coming to you from Brainerd, Minnesota in the Blue Cottage Agency. And I want to welcome all of you. We're coming from all parts of the country, which is just wonderful. And tonight we're going to be talking about jerks in fiction and in real life. And the two authors we have tonight are not the jerks. They're just writing about the jerks. Have you ever recognized a person in your life who echoes a fiction character you despise or vice versa? Today we're going to hear from two authors who know their jerks and what to do about them. So tonight we're going to welcome B.K. Froman, author of Hardly Any Shooting Stars, and Louise Carnachan, author of Work Jerks, How to Cope with Difficult Bosses and Colleagues. We put up their websites in the chat so you can look at those, visit their website when you have time. So Louise, I'm going to introduce Louise.
Come out. Think about that.
Beauty.
Thank you.
You're muted, Louise.
How'd that happen? Okay. It's very hard to mute me. I'm back. So it's my pleasure to be able to interview Barb, as I know her, also BK or Barbara Froman, who has written her 9th book, 9. This one is called Hardly Any Shooting Stars Left, and it is a good one. I'm a mystery lover, so I loved this book. And she's got a protagonist who's got a few jerk qualities. So I think maybe we could just start right off, Barb, with having you talk a little bit about what you were thinking about with Lexi DePriest and how you describe her.
Hey Louise, should I read her bio and her bio first?
Go for it.
Oh, sure. I thought you handed it over to me. I'm sorry, Krista.
Oh, sorry. That's okay. That's okay. I'll read her bio.
I'm the jerk.
No. So not the jerk. So tonight, B.K. Froman, she is the author of 9 books and an award-winning writer, radio, TV talent, and university educator who lives in Oregon after spending several decades in Oklahoma. Her titles draw readers across many genres and ages as she captures thoughtful and humorous perspectives of people and change. She especially enjoys the camaraderie and quirkiness in small towns and preserves a slice of Americana that is quickly fading. Her awards include the Barnes & Noble Top Indie Pick from 2018, the Laura Short Fiction 2018 and 2019, First Chapter Award, Arizona Writers Association, the Willa International Award finalist in 2016, and the Clackamas Literary Award in 2015. Froman uses her humor and clever dialogue to remind her readers that life is all about change. And her book that we're discussing tonight is Hardly Any Shooting Stars Left. It's a cozy Western mystery, but it is also so much more. This story, while filled with suspense and intrigue, also offers humor, tension, a fast-moving storyline, and the emotional struggle we have with forgiveness. Truth and grace abound in this new novel from B.K. Froman, award-winning author of 3 series, the Lutheran Ladies Circle, 2 Pan book series, and Hope and Hometown series. And I think I'll read a little bit about Louise too, and then I'll hand it over to you to interview Barb about her book. So Louise Carnachan is an organization development consultant and leadership coach with over 40 years of experience. Lessons from her career are the foundation of her first book, Work Jerks, How to Cope with Difficult Bosses and Colleagues. Louise's practical advice comes from being in the trenches as an employee, as well as being a coach to others facing problematic work situations. Her writing has been called relatable, engaging, and graced with humor. She writes a workplace advice blog found on her website. Be sure to register to get them every 2 weeks. They're amazing blogs. Her book, Work Jerks, is published by She Writes Press. It is currently available for pre-sale and will be widely available for order at all bookstores after mid-June. Louise is part of the Chrysalis Women's Writers at Clackamas Community College, where she met Barb Froman. Louise is coming to us from West Lynn, Oregon, along with her feline office mates, Sammy and Davy, who may make an appearance. We hope they do. So I'll hand it over to you, Louise, and to discuss Barb's book. Thank you.
Well, obviously, I was so excited, Barb, that I jumped right in. I don't know how I missed my cue, but I did. At any rate, let's come into your story by hearing about your protagonist, Lexi, who is really, she's got some sharp edges to her, but I'd like you to describe how you see Lexi.
You know, Lexi can be a jerk, that's for sure. And I would describe her as a 26-year-old who is hungry. And so she is hungry to get out of her little tiny one street town in Eastern Oregon that she never ever did quite fit into. And she's hungry to work with engineers to learn about engineering and computer programming instead of cows. She's hungry to get rid of all the frustrations she has because she just got a little taste of her dreams in college, and then she got pulled out and pulled back to the ranch when her father died, and she's back working with cows again. And so that makes her hungry to get rid of the guilt that she's carrying because she would like to dump this ranch, but it is her father's legacy and where she spent her childhood. She is, I would say, a typical adult, young adult. If any of you have young people and you ask them to do something, they'll always take a shortcut. And so this is Lexi. She is taking a shortcut. So when she's doing ranching, she is using drones, and many of the townspeople around there do not like this whatsoever. However, she's not typical as a young person because she has very little social skills. She often says the horse was the one who raised her. So I often think of her as like a gumball machine. She just has a thought and it just rolls out of her mouth. So this makes for a lot of really hilarious and kind of cringe-worthy moments, awkward moments. And then when you throw murder on top of all this, and the fact that she is being watched and by a malevolent character and she is not aware of it, it just amps up the tension for Lexi all the more. So,
yeah, you do a great job of letting the reader know what Lexi doesn't know, and the tension gets really significant along the way. Lexi, particularly at the beginning of the book, is even more rough than she becomes. And I know you, and I know you are a very socially skilled individual. I'm wondering what it was like having Lexi in your head for the 1.5 years or whatever it took to write the book and edit it.
you know, that's an interesting question. I'm gonna ride that question kind of around the pasture, and then I'll bring it into the barn. So it's gonna trust me, I'm gonna get there. I'm there. I'm gonna start with asking each one of you to imagine your life in front of you, kind of like a line. Just imagine it. You don't have to share it. And then put a dot along your lifeline about things that have happened to you, critical moments, turning points. So it could be marriage, could be death, birth of a child, positive, what you might consider positive and negative moments. If we, and let's say all of us that are here, we didn't know each other. So if we dropped in on you right after one of those upheaval moments, you probably wouldn't be, let's say, at your best. And so most of us have moments in our lives that we're not proud of. And this is when a time that we're meeting Lexi, keeping in mind she doesn't have great social skills. But let me share with you why these moments make such great stories. And this is because, and I'm going to take you, this is where we're riding around the pasture, so stay on the horse with me. This is because we are wired, genetically wired to, our brain wants to keep equilibrium. We are wired to avoid conflict and change. We don't like it. We resist it. It's very, very normal within ourselves. Like I said, our brain is constantly working. It's taking in, I believe it's 11 million pieces of sensory information. Oh, I forget, about every 30 seconds or so. And it's trying to keep a equilibrium for you, keep all of us, keep you safe and keep you emotionally safe. And it's working unseen, it's vigilant, it's working all the time. That's why you're feeling a little uncomfortable sometimes when you walk into some place and it's a sunny day, but you don't quite feel normal or you don't feel good about it. Your brain is picking up on something. It can make you cranky because anytime we hit change or conflict, like I said, it's upset our apple cart. And I'll give you an example of this. My favorite cranky moment is whenever my phone updates and they decide to put in a new user interface. And I get so peeved and cranky that I have to change and learn something new. I was in the grocery store yesterday and I heard a gentleman ask the clerk, "Where are you hiding the bottled water now?" Because again, change, grocery stores like to move and change things around and it irritates us. But here's the real hilarious hoot about life. We are wired to resist conflict and change. However, change is the constant in our lives. So we are always butting up against this tug of war that's going on in our life. Lexi is an anti-hero, and we're dropping in on her at this point in our life. And if you haven't written or read stories with an anti-hero, I'm going to suggest you think of, they've been used for years, Scarlett O'Hara. She wasn't always the most popular character, and sometimes she was a real jerk on there. Usually your anti-heroes have a good heart, but they have such cracks and such fractures within them that they cannot get the thing that they want the most. And here's the kicker: they won't change to get it. So in a story, everything that happens along in the plot has to just bash up against them and keep pushing them to make that a change, to get them to that one point in the storyline where they will finally make a decision to change or not change. So here I'm going to park the horse in the barn. Here I'm getting the horse to answer your final question, Louise, is that how was it to have Lexi in my head? I don't really carry the characters in my head. What I am carrying for that year and a half or 2 years when I'm working on a story is I'm carrying the plot. And the plot is always, how do you keep pushing characters forward? Because it's not just the protagonist, it'll be all my secondary characters too. So I'm always carrying that plot. And every time I see something at the grocery store or a movie or any other story, I'm always thinking about, how am I going to force change into my characters to get them to some point where they'll make a decision or not? Because what I'm really after, my whole goal in writing any of these books, is to have characters that when you read it, or any reader reads it, they might go, ooh, that kind of sounds a little bit like me. I can relate to that. And when they see our characters make a change, it gives them a bit of a pathway so they can see how to make changes in their own lives. And that's what it's for.
Yeah. Well, in some ways, I'm relieved you weren't carrying Lexi and her voice in your head the whole time. But yeah, so it's really interesting to get a kind of a snapshot into how that works for you, because I'm sure different writers have different ways of approaching it, whether it's the character that's driving the story for them or whether it's the plot. And it is an interesting and complicated plot that has a lot of technology in it. You already mentioned the drones. but you also use 3D printers in a really interesting way. And I know basically nothing about either of these things, and you obviously know a lot. So I'm curious to know how you did your research on that.
Natalie Kleinbright, I don't think she's on here, but she just posted something on Facebook today and had said, as far as readers, writers, we're not nosy, we're creative. And I love that because that gives me an excuse to say, no, I'm just creative. And so the drones came about because I was driving through our local college, Clackamas Community College, and there were people out on the baseball field, 6 people, but they were side by side. They weren't playing baseball. And of course, being creative, I put the brakes on the car and got out and said, hey, what are y'all doing? Because I'm just nosy like that. And it is our firefighters, our fire department at the college. They give certification for firefighters, which you can imagine in Oregon, that's very big during forest season, summer season. And part of the college class was certification for flying drones because they use it for aerial reconnaissance to see the fire boundaries. And they make it look so, these kids make it look so easy. They're probably 20-something-year-olds and they just fly the drones to the outfield and fly them back and out and back and out and back. And I thought to myself, wouldn't that, I would just love to hear what my Yahoo relatives in Oklahoma would say about this. And all of a sudden I thought, there's a story born, but of course, I've got to learn how to do this, as you're saying, Louise. So one of my son's friends gave me drone lessons, and I've learned 2 particular things. And that is that the drones are, if I'd grown up using a controller, if I were a gamer and it could use a little controller, I would be really good at this, but I'm not. And so there was a steep learning curve of just how to use a drone. And then the second is I discovered within our acreage, we have 1 tree and it is a magnet attracting tree. So no matter how I fly a drone, it goes into that tree, no matter what. So that led to the next discovery, which is when you run a drone into things, what usually happens is it chips or breaks or bends the rotors, which are the propellers. And the least expensive way to get those taken care of is a 3D printer. So you print off your own. So that led to a whole new piece of research, and which I'll just say as an aside was very fascinating because the 3D printer folks predicted, and the research also predicts and bears this out, they're saying that in the future, most homes will have 3D printers. We will buy them and put them in our house just like microwaves because they are so unbelievably useful. So you can print your glasses, new glass frames, and little broken pieces that pop off of things. And you can actually use 3D printers to print almost anything. So there's a change coming for us, and you heard it first. In this
A hoarder's dream, Barb.
Exactly.
You could print everything.
Everything you want.
Everything in the world. I want to wrap a couple of things together because you talked about, what would your relatives back in Oklahoma think of these drones, right? And so you've set this in a small town named Telos that does not exist, but is in Eastern Oregon. And you've got turns of phrase, you've got small town life really wonderfully drawn, and turns of phrases that I'm thinking probably had to come out of your childhood, but if not, maybe you could talk about a little bit. A couple like treated like dog scabies. I mean, you know, that gave me pause and a good laugh. I like that. And then, you know, I trust you about as much as a naked man offering me a free t-shirt. You know, these are wonderful turns of phrase, and your writing always has fun turns of phrase. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how that kind of came about for you, and if it's really rooted in your childhood or it's just your twisted little brain that does it.
Maybe my twisted little brain came from my childhood. Let's go with with that one. There are many incidents, and I can say this now that my mom and dad have passed on there, but so I can say that there's many incidents that came from my childhood. I also can add that I had to clean most of them up, both in language and in the incidents, in order to put them in a book. And so we grew up really poor, and so within our kind of neighborhood farm community, most people were, and they made all their own entertainment, and Yahoo, it was pretty interesting. So a lot of those things found their way into books. I once had a reviewer who said to me, well, I lived on a ranch, nobody ever talked like that where we lived, and I had, all I could think of to say is, you're so blessed that you didn't have the same characters in your family that I had in my childhood, and I'm so sorry that you didn't have some of those same characters in your childhood, because they're quick story just about my dad is that he swore that my mom boiled his shirts because they were getting tight around the neck. And, you know, she says, you're just getting fat. And no, after 50 years of marriage, I have not put on 1 pound. See, my family doesn't change. I have not put on 1 pound whatsoever. And so she just solved the whole problem by just going and getting new shirts and just sneaking them into his drawer. But he noticed the little labels in them, and they were no longer 16.5 size shirts in there. So again, I have not gained any weight in 50 years. And so he refused to wear those shirts. Mom, and you'll be able to address this when you talk about jerks and how to deal with conflict. Mom would just take and cut the labels out of every one of his shirts so he could not know the size. Same shirts, same ones that he was complaining about. That was fine. He would wear them, but he had not changed. So yes, the short answer is yes, it comes from childhood.
Wonderful workarounds in your family. I'm sure many of us could add stories with workarounds that happen to make things run smoothly without conflict. That's great. I wonder, Krista, whether I've got time to ask Barb one more question, or should we? I do. Great, because I want to talk about Peewit. Peewit. You've got some really great animals in this book, and you've got to talk about Peewit.
Are you sure? And here's the reason I ask. For those of you, I once took a Universal Studios tour, and they said, okay, we're going to tell you how they created the Emerald City in Oz. And I went, no, because I wanted the magic to stay. So if you're one of those people who don't want to hear about green screens and how they do dinosaurs and create wonderful flying monsters, if you don't want to know what's behind the scenes, then cover your ears, because I will tell you that when you run into animals in books, they're really tools. It's something you pull out of the author's tool chest and you stick it in if you're doing it as you should, because every animal should be in that story to move the plot ahead. So you're going to run into 3 animals, particularly the horse Molly, the dog border collie named Chicken, and they are characters. They're written as characters. They have personalities. They have specific things that they have to do in that plot. I'm going to skip ahead just so we'll have time to ask you more questions. And that is, you want to know about Peewit. For everyone else who haven't seen the book, read the book, Peewit is a little Nubian goat. And Nubians, if you haven't ran into them, when they're full grown, they're about 2 feet tall. So this is a baby Nubian goat. He wears a diaper because he's inside all the time. And he has a little pajama fleece coat they put on him. And he even has his church pajama fleece coat. He also is a little different, used a little different, but he also is a tool. The thing about Nubians, they have legs like bed springs. So if you see one, they're just springing all over the place. And he is teamed with probably one of the crankiest jerks in the book, which is an extreme opposites. But he is so darling and so cute. And then as the book goes on, it is a melding of those two personalities. And this is a secondary character. The purpose of him is that whenever you read the book, notice the scenes that he comes into. He is setting tone for those scenes. And it is just like when you're watching a movie in the theater, when you notice the music changes and he's the music. When you notice the music changes and the music starts, it is making a change in part of the storyline. And while you may not see it in the story, your brain will pick up on that and go with it. But other than that, he's just cute and adorable.
He's really cute. And to pair him with Mrs. Blackburn is perfect. It's just perfect.
What a crank. Yeah.
So I'm curious, do you have any more books in the offing?
I do. I'm so excited. And thank you for asking that. I have a book that's rolling in my head. It has been for some time, and I'm about halfway through. It is set in the 1920s. It is a 14-year-old girl who has been abandoned by her family in the Chicago tenements, and she goes on a search looking for her family. Her search is going to take her through the slaughterhouses that Upton Sinclair has visited. It will go through hospitals during the time of the Spanish flu and returning World War I veterans and the poor farm. And all she wants in this world is to find her family and find a place to live with them. And it will be quite a saga. So it is exciting every day I get 5 hours of writing time, and it's exciting to be able to dump that story because it's lovely. Thank you for asking.
Well, I can't wait for you to be bringing it into Chrysalis. It will be great to hear it. Yeah. Thanks, Barb.
Oh yeah. So Krista, did you want to say something? Do you want me to
Yes, thank you so much. That was so fast, so interesting. I could hear my girls, my twins are in the other room, and I could hear them go, oh, when you're talking about the little goat. Oh, so now we're going to turn it over to Barb to discuss Louise's book, which is nonfiction. So we've got the whole combination of fiction and nonfiction, which is super fun, both relating to jerks. So take it away, Barb.
Oh, thanks. And this is a super, super book. We're going to be able to use it in several different ways. I'm going to read some of these questions I wrote down so I don't mess them up too badly. And I just wanted to start off because we're talking about jerks, and I certainly know what I think a jerk is, but I'm going to ask you, Louise, to give us a definition similar to what you give in the book. So we're all going to start off on the same page of how would you define a jerk?
Yeah, thanks, Barb. I think that's super important because it's really in the eye of the beholder. There's some behaviors that probably all of us would pretty much agree are jerk behaviors, but then there are other things that bug me, but they don't bug you. And the degree of irritation can be different, even with things that we'd all kind of go, yeah, not so great, but it doesn't bother me that much, but it might bother you a lot. So what I call a jerk is somebody who's irritating to you, and it's not a one-off. This is a consistent pattern of behavior over time.
Okay.
And I've
all right.
defined 9 of them. You know, you could come up with any taxonomy you want. I call them jerkotypes. They're archetypes of jerks. And everybody who's written about this kind of material has brought up their own classifications. But the ones that are pretty familiar and everyone writes about, the narcissist is, you know, kind of ubiquitous. The know-it-all, you know, those are ones that pretty much everybody uses. And then I have some of my own kind of terms, like the runaway train, which is a series of extremes. The fight or flee, you know, the conflict avoidant, the poor me, the person who's always victimized, the jokester, who, you know, they land flat. And I have a whole series of ones on, I call it We Are Family. These are the people who they're just a little too close, whether they actually are married to each other. And I've run into that in workplaces, or if they're in a teeny tiny town, or if they were best friends and then that falls apart, or they were romantic and that falls apart. So I have subtypes under each of these. And then I have a huge potpourri under the habitually annoying jerk. And you could take that everywhere from the person who puts fish in the microwave to the person who just can't seem to turn off their audio and you hear everything everywhere. The people who bring their kids in when they're sick and they're running around, you know, just, you know, choose your poison.
I mean, now I'm excited because, again, this is great material for any writer. So we, in a sense, we love jerks, especially when they're on the page and we don't have to deal with them. And that's what you're going to help us learn is what happens when we don't have to deal with these people. So let's just dish out the dirt on some of these. And you have been very specific in the book, and you remind us that this does not necessarily mean that someone has mental health problems, and that all of us at some time or another have exhibited jerk behavior. I like that disclaimer in there, which, you know, I certainly will agree with. But I really am curious. Let's just jump in the deep end of the pool. What is the scariest, or who is the scariest jerk to work with?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure most of us would agree it's the narcissistic leader. They're pretty terrifying because they have power. And if they're smart and they've got charisma, they're really scary. Because I think what's hard for most people to understand is their self-absorption is so far beyond what a normal person's is that it's hard to believe they really have zero empathy, none. You know, they'll use people mercilessly. And you're in the favored graces for as long as you're useful to them. And the second you cross them, the second that you're no longer useful or you threaten them because they think somebody above is going to see you as more competent, you're in trouble. And I think for the average person, you get kind of sucked in and you don't realize how vulnerable you are, you know, with that kind of person. So in my estimation, they are the scariest ones.
Okay. All right. And I unfortunately, I think we probably all have met somebody like that or worked with somebody like that. So,
Yeah.
So I want to dig into, only because I brought it up earlier, and that was because we wanted to avoid conflict. And so I kind of wanted to dig into a little bit on the fight or flight jerk. And one of the things that they will do is this disappearing act on you. So tell us about what this kind of person is like, and what are they getting out of avoiding conflict besides just avoiding pain? But what are they doing, and what can we do?
Well, I don't think you can underestimate avoiding pain. You know, what you were talking about earlier, Barb, about what drives characters, you know,
Yeah.
we don't want to change, we don't want pain, we don't like it. And we have no idea what people are bringing with them. in their lives when they come to work or show up anywhere. So the person, and it's the fight or flee. So these people do flee, and they are either vacating physically or mentally or both. So one great example, and I've seen this in more than one work environment, the person where any whiff of, I wouldn't even call it conflict, just a little bit of disagreement, and they're gone. They're just not there. You turn around and they're missing. And this is particularly problematic for the person or the people who report to somebody like that because they can't get decisions. And when you don't get decisions, you just work around people. You know, you do what you have to. The other way they can vacate is mentally. And you've probably been in that position where you've been in a meeting, something comes up and they just go blank. I mean, you're looking at somebody's vacant eyes. They're just not there. I don't know where they went to, but they're not really participating anymore. So kind of coaching these people back in to engage isn't always easy. And when I've coached people like that, you know, I've kind of wound them back to, well, what's happening for you when something happens like, you know, that makes you feel like you want to leave. And usually people can identify something that's going on in their bodies, you know, where their stomach turns, they feel sick or they feel hot, lightheaded, you know, any number of things, palm sweating. And that's all good because now you have a cue that it's happening. So once you know it's happening, you have some sort of chance of talking yourself down. If you don't know what's happening, there's nothing you can do to intervene. And intervening isn't easy without some practice. You know, and under the worst of conditions for people, my recommendation is always feel your feet.
Explain that.
This is something I learned in acting a million years ago. When you'd be on stage and suddenly you're like in a panic, is feel your feet. If you put attention on physically feeling where your feet are on the floor or in your shoes, you're back in your body.
Oh.
Yeah, it's literally very grounding. And then you can be present again.
Well, I was thinking what I was saying earlier about, you know, our brain is always working, and you're just underlining that it's giving us silent clues, but a lot of times we're just kind of like, oh, and we're just focused on the panic part of ourselves, whether it's dealing with a jerk or conflict or whatever is upsetting us, but it's giving us clues. So I really appreciate you telling us to pay attention to those clues.
Yeah, I'm always looking for hacks, you know.
Oh, sure.
What's something that'll get you back fast,
Sure.
right? Because you don't have time to go sit on a psychologist's couch for a while. You got to get back in the game. So what'll get you there quickly?
Well, this is one of, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's go on.
No, I'm just going to say, this is one of the things I love about your book. And I know it's not out yet, so everybody can't not rush out at this moment and buy it. You can pre-order it, but you want to go out and get it, because sitting and reading this book is just like talking to a really good, level-headed friend about the jerks in your life. And so there, Louise, it's so comforting in such clear language of what to do. I want to bring up something that terrorizes me now. And that is that we've talked about jerks and different types, but we haven't really talked about dealing with those types. And you give specific steps, unlike some books that just give you kind of puffy air type of things. And you think, well, how do I do that? You give specific steps. And a number of those steps often involved thinking about the specific changes I have to make, because only I am control in dealing with the jerk. I can't change the jerk necessarily, but the specific changes I need, and then to get what I desire. And then I have to communicate those changes to my jerk if it's a safe situation to do so. Now, this is the part that I really need help with, that terrorizes me because it gets into that resistance of, we try to resist conflict and pain. And so how do you recommend that I gird my loins and face that communication?
Well, that's it, isn't it? Right there in a nutshell, is having to actually act.
Yeah.
That old saw of insanity is doing things the same way and expecting the results to change.
Yeah.
They don't. You could do things that don't require you to act in any physical or verbal way, but that involves you changing your mind about what's going on in the situation. And sometimes that's successful. Sometimes you really can do that. You know, if you can get down to, I always ask people to get really specific about what it is that's bothering them. We tend to like to make generalizations. I think that's another one of our tendencies. Our brains want to take a bunch of information and just put a label on it. You know, this person's lazy. Well, what do you actually mean by that? And if what you mean is they're not showing up on time, that's different from not doing your work, or different from not being accurate. So, you know, get down to what is it exactly that's bothering you, and then decide how much of an importance it's going to have in your life. If it's something that really is irritating you, which is why I say, when we talk about what's a jerk, it's consistent behavior over time. I mean, anybody's going to have a lousy day. We all do. Some people have a lousy year. You know, things happen to folks, and we give them grace during that time. But if it's really something that's been bugging you for a while and it's not getting better, and you find yourself getting more and more upset, you're talking to your friends and family about it, they're sick of it, even the cat doesn't want to hear it anymore, they walk away, you know, or you find yourself, you know, sitting down eating an entire bag of Oreos at night, there's something wrong. You know, at this point, you got to do something different. So if you choose to take some action, what I've tried to be is really practical about what do you think you can do if it's safe, that won't get you fired, for one thing, because most people have to keep their jobs. That's, you know, that's why you're trying to deal with it. You want to keep the job and potentially keep the relationship, because if the relationship goes, then it's not very fun to go to work. And then I've had a lot of people I've coached say to me, I don't know what to say. I just don't even know what to say, which is kind of what prompted giving people mini scripts. And what I would say about that is, they're not intended to be your words. They're just ideas for you to then translate into your words, because it doesn't do you any good to sound like Louise when you're Barb. You know, you need to sound like yourself. But just some ideas. Most people do better if they just know how to begin. You know, how do I start this? And when am I going to do that? And how am I going to do that? So I give a variety of suggestions based on the situation and what you think you might try. You know, what do you see yourself doing? And then I suggest you practice with somebody who's safe. And I would say probably not somebody who's at work, because that just sends up a whole thing of gossip, and that's no good. So practice with somebody else, you know, try it out on them, see if you can get the words out, see what it sounds like, have them give you some feedback. You know, is it something that you feel like you can actually say? Does it just sound weird? You know, work on it, practice it a little bit. And as I say to clients, have it in your back pocket, you know, just be ready then, because there's no reason to be surprised if it happens all the time. There's no surprise anymore. And, you know, as one of my dear friends said to me, well, you often have in there, you know, if it doesn't get better, go to your manager. Do people really do that? And I said, that's the reason why it's way down on the list, because most people don't, or the manager doesn't know what to do, right?
Right.
So, you know, that certainly for egregious problems, you should be talking to somebody who's got a little more authority. So right now I'm talking about coworkers. If it's your boss who's the problem, then you have some other things to sort out. And I've given a whole laundry list of things you might sort out if it's the boss who's the problem.
You know, what I really like is that you have actually been in the trenches. This isn't theoretical. information for you. You've lived it. You've been with people. What you share applies to whether you're working. Because when you said, go to your boss, and I'm thinking, I'm retired, but that still does not mean I do not. I still run into all kinds of jerks. And so I love the ability that you've given to equip me with something to put in my pocket to kind of be ready if I can prepare it and remember it when it comes.
Well, that's it, right? Yeah. I can't tell you how many things I've learned from being an actor. So there's a reason why you rehearse. You rehearse a lot.
Do you ever rehearse in front of the mirror? I mean, I know you said to find somebody, but no, it doesn't work.
I don't rehearse in front of the mirror because I get so horrified looking at myself in the mirror that I think I just panic. That would be the image in my head, is me looking weird in the mirror. So no, I don't recommend that. I've had people tell me that's how they want to practice speeches. And I'm like, I couldn't do that. That would just freak me out. I never learned lines that way. Never. So you want to get the words down so that they're there, and then they're natural when you say them because you're responding to the situation. You don't want to get all loaded for bear and then go out and just blurt on somebody. That's a hit and run. That's no good. That's not going to work out.
Then you've become the jerk.
Oh, absolutely. You've become the jerk.
Yeah. Switched positions on there.
Yes.
I always love talking to you because you have, no matter what, whether been in church organizations or PTA or PTOs, I guess we call them now, or no matter what, whenever there's people that come together in an organization, there'll always be those conflicts and disagreements of how to do it in kind of a jerk type of situation. I'm getting close, and so we want to leave some time for questions, and there's so much to discuss. Because we have so many writers here, I really want you to touch on the fact we're going to step back away from our personal lives a little bit and look at, I know that for my book, someone would go into the fiction area. For your book, they would go into the self-help area, but
it's in the business section.
In the what kind of section?
Business.
Oh, in the business section. Okay. So yeah. I want the writers here to also go into the business section for your book, because I would like for you to talk about two things, and that is using your book for jerks to develop character lines, not only for jerk characters or villains that we want, but just flawed characters, because that's who we are and that's who we relate to in books. And also drawing the pathways to heal our jerkness. So it helps readers figure out pathways for healing. So how would you see authors using your book?
Well, I love that use. So thank you very much for that. Yeah. The thing about a character in fiction is we love flawed characters. If they're too perfect, they're kind of boring. So that character flaw is part of the interest in a character, and we want to see them develop in the course of the story, that their character arc changes. So I think that moment of discovery, so we start with, the once upon a time, that's the status quo, that's the person behaving like they always behave. And then, as you were talking about, when we were talking about your book, Barb, that moment of discovery of this isn't working for me anymore. I'm going to have to do something different. And that's a really fun part to write. And it's a really fun part to read, is when they go, oh, the light bulb just went on. And perhaps, I don't know if any of my types, my jerkotypes, apply to any of your characters, that you might go shopping for how they might change. Right. I don't know, because there are a variety of ways in which they might change.
So speaking of change, and I want to just kind of pull it down, Krista, so we have some time for, But I have just one more question, and that is, all of us, if we close our eyes, I'm sure we can think of some jerk that's annoying us in our life. So could you give us a piece of hope for us to travel into the question period? And can folks be optimistic about their relationships with the jerk?
If I didn't believe change was possible, I never would have been in the business I was in, So I have to say, yes, there's optimism because relationships can change and they do change. A lot of it has to do with, and I keep putting the onus back on the person who's having the problem. It's with us.
Right.
What are you willing to let go of that you can actually get into a better place with this person? And I've been in situations working with somebody I did not trust and did not like. And I really had to face myself with what am I willing to let go of if I want to stay in this job for a period of time. And I did. I worked on it, boy. I worked on that one. Took me about 6 months. And it was a lot of me writing every morning how I wanted to show up in that situation. And it did change. And then he went away. So that was kind of fun. But you can't count on that happening, right?
Look at the skills you gained in the meantime,
But it was great to not feel sick to my stomach every day I went to work. Right? That's a terrible place to be.
And I would imagine there's some feeling, a bit of control for yourself, that you can't control the jerk, but you can control something within yourself that you're working on the problem. And that's gotta feel good.
Well, that's right, because that helpless feeling is a terrible place to be. Then you're being the victim. And that's a key for me when I start hearing myself whine a lot. Like, okay, who's got the problem here? It's me. So what am I going to do about that? Do I want to keep wallowing in my misery or do I want to actually change something? And the one thing I can always change is how I'm perceiving something. Or I can leave. And I've done that too. I've left jobs.
And that makes me so excited because I do want to share with everyone. I know, Krista, I'll throw it back to you here right after this, but I just want to share that people don't know this, that within your book, there on almost every section, there is a point of like, what if you're the jerk? What if you recognize yourself in this book and, under the different jerk types? Because I did on every one of those jerks. It's like, oh my goodness, I got to fix this somehow. And you give very clear steps of how to start on your own change. Thank you.
Well, Barb, I never would have put you in all those jerk categories at all.
I'm going to work harder then.
Thank you.
Yeah, I wouldn't put either of you in those categories, but too, yeah, just like what Barb said, I learned so much from just interactions, neighbors or friends and relatives and just different things. And it's such a great book. And the humor in it is fantastic. So it's for everybody. We do have a couple questions in here. So Lee made a statement that this was so much fun to hear both authors who I've heard in Chrysalis interview each other and tell about their books and writing them. Thank you, Lee, for saying that. And then Donna has a question for Barb. Louise shared a tip that sometimes we have to change our own behavior in order to maintain a relationship at work. Have you had a character who had to go through something like this to change behavior in order to maintain a relationship with your protagonist?
Ooh. Well, yes, every character, absolutely every character. By the time, because that's what I write about is change. It's really my subversive attempt to change the world is I'm going to put it in fiction and put it in stories. So you don't realize you're hearing about stories about change. So every character, even the sub-characters, are going through a bit of change because it's truly all about community working together. We, as Louise was saying, is that when you practice dealing with your own jerk, you need somebody who believes and trusts in you that you can bounce that rehearsal off of. And so when we support each other, we grow. And so it is all about not being the Lone Ranger and changing enough to believe that somebody didn't boil our shirts and that we need to make some changes and compromise a little bit with other people. So yes, thank you for asking.
I am putting the links to the websites for Barb and Louise. They both have wonderful websites. Thank you, Janice. Janice says, well, wonderful presentation, ladies. Flawed characters, check. Jerks in our lives, check. And I'm thinking back to every category of jerks. Interesting. Yes, it's interesting.
And we just want to, I'm sure Louise wants to jump in here too, but thank you so much for spending an hour of your evening with us. That,
Exactly.
again, that goes back to community and support and allows us over the bumpy periods of our lives when we think, oh, at 2 o'clock in the morning when you're writing and you think nobody's going to read this. So thank you.
Indeed. Thank you so much for being here across the time zones. I really appreciate it.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful to have the community of readers and writers together. And it is such an honor to have both Louise and Barbara here and to be able to work with you two with Blue Cottage Agency is such a delight. You're both talented, amazing women. And I thank you so much for sharing your time and your books, and keep writing. And for those of you who are writing, we always need good books. There's always room on the shelf for good books. So continue to do that. And this will be live on, or this will be recorded and on YouTube. So if you want to relook at it, you can. And please visit the websites of our authors. And with that, I wish you all a very, very lovely evening. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Oh, it's just so lovely to see everybody.
It is.